I'd like to start off by asking a couple of questions. Do you remember your first smartphone? Can you recall what the internet was like at the time? Think about it. I was born at the turn between Generation Y, the millennial generation, and Generation Z, so my early childhood was relatively internet free. And Wi-Fi was then somewhat unheard of. Mobile devices wasn't really that common. But I finally got my first smartphone at the age of 16. Now, at the time, did it struck me how accessible the internet had become? No. I was busy converting YouTube videos into downloadable MP3s. And my mobile device was a convenient tool, a luxury to have. And who would have guessed? Slowly and without myself realizing, this luxury became a necessity. In 1964, Sir Arthur C. Clarke, with reference to the transistor and communication satellite, said, and I quote, "These things will make possible a world in which we can be in instant contact with each other, wherever we may be, where we can contact our friends anywhere on Earth, even if we do not know their actual physical location." And within half a century, our reality has surpassed all expectations. Widespread internet access and the rise of social media have not only redefined how we communicate, but also how we share information. Science has become such an integral part of this change, as well as our education. Every person would have a rough framework of how science fits into our modern world, from understanding how rainbows form to how wireless technology works. Now, in the past, this flow of information would come from education in school, reading, physical books, newspapers, articles, from watching TV, listening to the radio, and even more so through traditional word of mouth. The pool of knowledge is dynamic. It's constantly changing with what's relevant and irrelevant. And back then, at a somewhat relaxed and controlled pace. Out with the old and in with the new. But now, the internet has radically changed and impacted this flow, making communication so much more robust and has shaped the public's understanding of science in more ways than one. Now, bear this in mind because I will come back to this in a bit. With the abundance of information out there, things are much more convenient, yes. However, convenience always comes at a price, and this price is misinformation. What if it comes to topics that are disputed or do not have a clear answer? It could be something as clickbaity as the best way to avoid cancer, or something sensitive like, I don't know, the effects of a vaccine. When the answers that we're seeking have a personal impact, this is where the problem sets in. Facing an overwhelming amount of information, most, if not all of us, just want one clear answer. We tend to seek that one perfect article, that one perfect social media post, that one perfect YouTube video to clear up all our doubts. It's like finding a needle in a haystack, or maybe one of many needles in a haystack. To others, it may seem like finding hay in a needle stack instead, when one ends up with more questions or having to go through a roller coaster of negative emotions in the process. This is an infodemic. An infodemic is defined by the World Health Organization, the WHO, as an overabundance of information, some accurate and some not. That makes it hard for people to find trustworthy sources and reliable guidance when they need it. Now, in this digital age filled with new ways to make revenue, and thus it has become very, very easy, extremely easy to manipulate information, and thus misinform others. And the impacts of this infodemic can go far beyond the individual level, especially with the existence of social media. The issue here isn't just one person being misinformed. It is when one person unknowingly spreads misinformation, and this further worsens the problem. Remember when I mentioned how the public's understanding of science can be shaped? Shaping this public's understanding of science doesn't just mean filling in knowledge gaps. It doesn't just mean increasing awareness. It also means changing the public's perspective, and most importantly, their outwardly behavior towards a certain topic. And this is where the real challenge comes in. And when it comes to misinformation, we have to combat it and to at least relieve or slow down the effects of this infodemic. Now to address the white elephant in the room. The clear example here would be the COVID-19 pandemic. In 2020, the WHO Director General Tedros Ghebreyesus said, "We're not just facing an epidemic, we're facing an infodemic." Now I say that in the face of a deadly virus, the COVID-19 infodemic poses a greater viral threat. The amplified spread of misinformation, of rumors, as well as conspiracy theories have only been in the way and have jeopardized actual efforts in containing the virus, the actual virus. It came to a point where in 2021, just last year, WHO actually published guidelines for managing infodemics, termed as infodemiology. This would be the focus on the spread of information rather than an epidemic. And this acknowledges the dangers of misinformation and highlights the need for efforts to curb its negative impacts. There is so much more to it than meets the eye. Now to bring things a little closer to home. In recent years before the pandemic set in, the Malaysian Institute for Public Health would conduct a national health and morbidity survey to gauge the rough state of public health in the country. Now, I could talk about how 1 in 5 Malaysian adults have diabetes. I could talk about how 1 in 2 adults in Malaysia were either obese or overweight, which was actually featured in the local news just over a week ago, as well as other statistics. However, the real shocking revelation that still remains the root of the problem is that roughly 35%, or roughly 1 in 3 Malaysian adults have low health literacy. Now, health literacy covers knowledge from disease prevention to leading a healthy lifestyle, and is very important in actually determining the overall state of public health. Now, this is a health crisis that we live in, amidst a time when we are also preoccupied in finding shortcuts, especially during an infodemic. And guess what? This is just the tip of the iceberg. We have bogus threads on messaging apps. We have sensationalized articles on groundbreaking research. We have constant and new conspiracy theories. The public understanding of science and health can be very, very distorted. So friends, is there light at the end of the tunnel? What now? What can we do to make a difference in light of this reality of the infodemic that we live in? The first thing is to always take new information with a grain of salt. Whether we disagree, whether we agree with the information we get, we should make it a habit of being skeptical. Be open-minded. Don't take things at face value. And most importantly, do not be afraid to ask yourself, what if I'm wrong? Like the story of some blind men encountering an elephant for the first time, where each man is just convinced that they know exactly what an elephant is like, but only after touching just one part of it. As much as we are convinced of our own beliefs, it won't do any harm to remain calm, to listen to others, and to change this mindset of simply jumping to conclusions. In other words, we have to deal with confirmation bias to avoid interpreting or seeking information that only serves to support what we want to believe. We have this tendency to go for the reassuring lie rather than the inconvenient truth. It saves us a lot of time and mental energy from having to explain and reason with ourselves. It's a shortcut that we take, and it's a very real issue. Unfortunately, the social media algorithm that we may be familiar with may automatically put forth this bias, displaying information that only we prefer. So it is really up to us to really dig deep in order to decipher the real deal. Learn how to always fact check with trusted sources. It can be governmental sites, it could be peer-reviewed papers, it could be reputable news portals. It is also always important to put everything into context and not just cherry pick what we want to find or use. We know that a picture is worth 1,000 words, but we must learn to truly look at the big picture in order to get all 1,000 words. Now, being skilled at navigating through references and sources will help you better sort out the real facts from the fake news. And in the process, it's always good to remind ourselves that as easy as it is to share news or information, we should never share unverified sources, as contributing to the infodemic is the last thing that we need. And finally, when engaging with others on the topic, be mindful and patient when communicating your thoughts and ideas within any setting. The goal isn't to impose your understanding of reality of things by force. It's not, but to allow others to realize it themselves and have their minds open to different ideas. We can only sow the seed of change, but whether or not that change happens depends on whether the receiving end is willing to accept and change their perspective and ultimately their behavior in the right direction. As the younger generation slowly takes over this digitizing world, how we communicate and inform others will be a duty that will only become more critical. Critical how? Critical in impacting the future of the public's understanding of health and science. In the next decade, I dare say that this digital landscape of the internet, of social media, it will only become more linked and robust, with even more rampant infodemics. So the question here is whether or not we are willing to take the initiative to make that difference in how we control this flow of information, to observe, navigate, and adapt to that change. I'm Weiren, and thanks for listening. Thank you.